All right. Hello and welcome, everyone. It is finally time to talk about all of the Incarnons that are not locked behind Steel Path Circuit. These are all the much more available Incarnons, and they are also very, very good on average at the very least. So, we're going to be talking about the Zariman Incarnons and then, of course, the Labs Incarnons as well, starting with the Zariman Incarnons. These are, of course, available from, you guessed it, the Zariman. Go do the Zariman grind, go see Cavallero, and go pick up these weapons is how you acquire them. But we're just mostly going to be talking about how good these weapons are, which, as you can see, is quite good. These being some of the best weapons in the game. Also, worth noting, these grades are a little bit different than how we do the weekly Incarnons. The weekly Incarnons are more so a fight between all of the Incarnons for your attention in terms of which one is the best one on any given week to be picking up. Obviously, all Incarnons are strong. These grades more so reflect their kind of total strength in the game when considering the good weapons, as opposed to being a, hey, just the Incarnons fight each other. So the grades are a little bit less strict. But also, the only real barrier to entry on these Incarnons is you need to be MR14, and beyond that, they're all very easy to get, and they're all the Incarnons that you should be picking up before you even think about doing Steel Path Circuit. So they've kind of got the upper hand in every given way, really. For that, we are going to go in order here with the Laetum, Innodem, and Phenmor, and then the Felarx and the Praedos. This is just the order that you can actually pick them up in from Cavallero, so that's going to be the order you're going to be picking them up in all likelihood. Starting with the Laetum. Now, the Laetum is honestly probably the best of all of the Incarnons. This weapon is absolutely incredible, and it trances just about everything in the whole game. And with the recent damage changes that we got, there's actually been a pretty big shift. Previously, I actually did not run the Devouring Attrition style build, which is kind of the anti-crits build, because the other one was better in the old damage system. The other Laetum build is this. This is the older one with the evolutions you can see here. And this basically focused on balancing crits so that you could get this 1200% damage bonus that would be active all the time and just keep it. Now, things have shifted to this lower investment build that just goes all in on Devouring Attrition and can use the new Pistol Elementalist. Obviously, new as of the last time we talked about these. But yeah, new Pistol Elementalist, of course, making the heat procs much, much better. Primed Fulmination, of course, the AoE is great. And Cascadia Flare letting us use those heat procs to stack up our base damage very, very well. For just an overall much cheaper build. 4 Forma on this thing is basically the best weapon in the game, which is crazy low investment considering the output that you're going to be getting. Thing about the Laetum, I will say, is that sometimes it can be a little finicky to charge up. Usually not a huge deal, but sometimes it'll give you a little bit of trouble. But it has so much Incarnon ammo that it hardly matters. Also, you usually just aim at the enemy's feet, and they just all die. If you actually aim directly at an enemy, they will experience pain unlike any other. But you usually don't need to. Usually, if you just shoot at the floor, everything that exists in front of you goes away. So it's insanely good. And of course, as I said, I didn't even charge it up all the way, and it just has so much ammo to go around. You don't need to ADS. You can just basically swing this thing back and forth through a hallway, and it'll just kill everything. It's absolutely insanely good, and everyone should be looking to pick up the Laetum. Basically, the moment you hit MR14, your only goal should be to acquire this weapon. There's a lot of good reasons why it's at S+ in terms of the grades. The only 2 weapons that are fighting this weapon in terms of strength are the Dual Toxicist Incarnon and the Furus Incarnon. And those 3 weapons sit a really large cut above actually everything else in the game in terms of secondaries at the very least. So extremely, extremely good weapon. One you should definitely be picking up. Next, we get to talk about the Innodem. Now, the Innodem has seen a stint as it was a stat stick and some weird stuff, and it's kind of gone back and forth and done a bunch of different things. Stat sticks are going away, and this actually kind of got patched to not work anymore anyway, so that was already gone for the Innodem. But this weapon is just an incredibly powerful and good influence weapon. That's really just what it has going on. Notable thing about this weapon is that while it does run primed reach, because of the range that it can have as its baseline, plus the range that it's going to get whenever you are in its form here for that extra +3, its range is so large that you can actually totally forego running primed reach on this weapon, and you'll still see incredible performance. And of course, you get to replace this with a damage increasing mod instead, or you can just fully replace this and have it make the build way cheaper to put together. So this is actually a pretty good option if you've really not invested in a lot of melee weapons. You can actually go a very cheap end and not even need primed reach, which a lot of melee weapons will. So that's an interesting thing about the Innodem. Other stuff here is that there are a few things in here that are just kind of choices about the evolutions that I want to talk about. You can choose to go this attack speed. Personally, I like the sprint speed, and I don't feel like it needs to be a faster weapon. You could also go more range. Even more range is one of those things that you're going to pick if you don't have that primed reach. But with primed reach, you really don't need this bonus, and I actually just like the ability to run faster as a nice little bonus. In this one, combo for continuous slide, aerial, and finisher damage. These don't usually come up. Skyborn Hunter is the only one that I think that will come up if you're trying to hit annoying flying enemies, which is why that choice is here. On this one, airborne melee kills give you 50% melee damage for 10 seconds, stacks up to 3 times. If the timer was longer on this, I might run it. You might find that you like this. The lower combo requirement is nice for evolving early, but also totally unnecessary. Combo on finisher is just pretty useless. And then in here, I just have collecting ammo grants 5 melee combo counter. Honestly, this last evolution probably will never come up. All of these are pretty worthless. A lot of them are on finisher, which are just things you're not going to do. But if you want to go with one of them, you can, because they're not going to make a huge amount of difference for you. That also means that you really don't need to fully evolve this weapon to really get a lot out of it. It kind of just does its thing pretty quickly, which is, of course, a great bonus because it is the second one that you are able to get, and you're going to need 3 Incarnons total before you can fully evolve any of the Zariman Incarnons. But yeah, the Innodem, absolutely great. Great, just like extremely large range, great heavy attack, just good damage overall. Just a really, really solid weapon. Builds combo quickly. Obviously, we're using here with Tennokai. Tennokai letting us just do those heavy attacks constantly. Because it's a dagger, it builds that up really, really fast, especially, like, you know, just great stuff. I mean, that was, like, barely evolved. I'm at 7x combo here. It is incredibly, incredibly powerful. Influence stuff, just a fantastic weapon. Very, very good. Just not doing anything, like, crazy specific. Speaking of not doing anything like crazy specific, the Phenmor is basically just worse Laetum, but being worse Laetum is obviously a very broad spectrum of things. This weapon is also on the Devouring Attrition passive that a lot of these weapons got. But the kind of a killer here is that the mods are just kind of less good here. That's really what you're looking at, and like the evolution for the Phenmor is also just less good. Recently, we did get Crux, which has helped the Phenmor out quite a bit, especially in its primary form, giving us that ammo efficiency, and then the 300% status chance is also no joke. This weapon basically just like barfs out a million heat procs and viral procs and kills enemies just in huge droves, and it's a big machine gun in its Incarnon form. So for this weapon, great stuff in its primary form, especially ammo efficiency wise. Now that we have Crux on, you can see just like being able to like pound down groups here with no real issue. This is, of course, like, you know, worse performance than you'll see out of actually even some Kuva weapons, but like still pretty good overall, especially as you like stack up your different bonuses and such. And then, of course, it has the Incarnon form, which is basically just the better version of what we were doing with the regular form, where it's just a big minigun instead. That kind of does the exact same thing. So, like, big just status hose. One of the weird things about this Incarnon is that its fire rate actually slows down the longer you hold it, which is a weird one. But it does have plenty of ammo and can just mow down squads of enemies very, very easily. But it's on kind of the lower end of these Incarnons, though the lower end is still incredibly, incredibly high. Next up, we're going to talk about the Felarx and then the Praedos. Felarx is kind of just better Phenmor in a lot of ways because, well, mainly because it's a shotgun, honestly. Being a shotgun is actually a huge, huge bonus, and it gets that, you guessed it, devastating attrition. Sorry, not devouring this time. They're the exact same bonus. But this is incredibly, incredibly good because it's a shotgun. Also, on this weapon, really weird stuff. You don't want to reload this gun. And that is very strange, and it's a weird thing to get used to, but it makes the Felarx incredible for builds that also want to use a melee weapon. Because of this, Evolution 3 Evolved Autoloader is plus 50% magazine reloaded per second when holstered, which means if you put the weapon away for 1 second, half your magazine is reloaded. So for the main form of this gun, that's incredibly, incredibly good because its reload is painfully slow. Otherwise, you can see the reload taking a full 6.5 seconds from empty. It is 1 shell at a time reloaded. But you can completely forego this by simply swapping to a different weapon for 2 seconds, and then your weapon will be full again. And you can, of course, swap back and forth quickly, and you'll have partial reloads. But you can basically always count on this weapon to be full of ammo with this build. So it is very, very nice for that. It is a thing that does need to be, you know, you need to get used to it. But that is why we run primed ammo stock, so you're always going to have more ammo. And we also don't need another damage mod. We are on Crux, of course, for even more efficiency with that. And we are on both point blank, blaze, and savvy to let this weapon just rip and tear through everything. It is incredibly powerful, and you're going to see the big difference between this and the Phenmor, I think, it's pretty apparent. It's pretty, like, absolutely clear just, like, how big the difference is between these two weapons. You know, needing to reload one single shell to kill that final guy there. Notable with this build is that the Incarnon form is actually quite good, especially when you start adding in Crux. It does kind of still want fire rate, as it is on the slow side, but if you have, like, the Sentinel giving you the reinforced bond or anything like that, this thing can really do great work. It has a ton of ammo, and I mean, clearly it's no slouch in terms of the damage output it can put into groups of enemies. If you are shooting, like, one single target, especially a boss-type enemy, you do actually not want to use the Incarnon form, as more of its damage relies on those statuses that it's outputting. But the main shotgun form is still stellar for putting down things like Archons or just any type of boss enemy, angels, so on and so forth. So very good on that front. And then finally, we need to talk about the Praedos. The Praedos are at S tier. I put them at S tier, as we can see here, but not for the usual reasons of the weapon just being, like, insanely good. The reason that this weapon is at S tier, and the reason why this weapon is used, I think, in most cases, is because of its passives. So, in its passives, we have 20% sprint speed and 20% slide, both speed increases. Then we have 15 initial combo. This one's actually kind of up in the air. You could go with, like, slide attack range or, like, the slam combo builder. Those are actually all pretty reasonable options, so do what you want there. But then on this one, we also have 30% parkour velocity. Now, getting 20% sprint speed, 20% slide speed, and getting the 30% parkour velocity means that this is better than, like, 2 regular yellow shards by just equipping it on your body. So, this is a stat stick, and probably will be the predominant stat stick going forward, because it just makes you fast. Also, for this final evolution, you can kind of choose what you want. I'm just on the ammo collection one again, but you could go any way you want to with this. So, because it makes you fast, that is incredibly good as just a thing where any build where you don't care about what your melee weapon is, you're not going to use it, or you're barely going to use it, pretty much you're going to equip the Praedos to that build so that you are much faster, and that is an incredibly powerful use case just across the game. In addition to that, this is an incredibly serviceable influence weapon, incredibly powerful. With all of the good passives that you would be wanting on this weapon, you can just slap on, like, your usual stuff influence build, and I think it performs very well, considering all of the other benefits that you're going to be getting just by having this weapon equipped. The weapon does not even need to be evolved in order for you to get all of the benefits that you're going to, like, you know, need that sprint speed and everything like that. So you just get, like, this huge range, nice influence weapon that, like, underperforms compared to, like, the best of the best influence weapons, but overperforms in terms of the passive buffs that it's going to be giving you. So for me personally, I think this is stellar performance, and the passive benefits are why I'm here. So getting stellar performance out of a weapon that I wasn't even planning on using is really great. Now we can talk about the Onos and the Ruvox. Now, I'm going to spoil it for you right here, right now. The Onos and the Ruvox are worse than all of the Incarnons we've talked about so far. Just straight up, that's just the way that it is. If we look at what they are here, the Labs Incarnons, the Onos, I've got it B+, and the Ruvox, I've got it B. Now, I want to iterate very cleanly. B does not stand for bad. It does not mean that these weapons suck and are terrible and you should not get them. The Onos is actually one of my favorite weapons in this video game. But they are considerable steps down from the Zariman Incarnons. The Zariman Incarnons are absolutely incredibly amazing, and the Onos and the Ruvox just tend to be more awkward weapons to use. Starting with the Onos, we are on this build here. This build's kind of a weird one, but because we are on the 5th evolution that gives us on punch through hit 200% damage for 10 seconds, that is an additive bonus with Hornet Strike effects. So we can actually just run the new Merciless Gunfight mod to just get the punch through, so we can trigger that extremely easily. So we don't actually need to run any base damage in this, except for, of course, Deadhead, but this will basically trigger our 200% base damage instantly, so we can actually just get some extra critical damage out of it. One of the other weird things about this weapon is that we build it crit, but we take the plus 20% status chance, minus 10% critical chance. That's because the critical stats actually kind of work out where we want the status more, because we do also want to be proccing our heat and viral procs, and that's especially important for the evolved side of this weapon. And even with the lower critical chance, we're still at 99% critical chance on this weapon. So very, very consistently, you're going to be seeing those big crits. So with that, let's shoot this weapon a bit. I think that the Onos is perfectly usable in its main form, especially with the punch-through change, or rather the punch-through mod, Merciless Gunfight being added to this. This is, like, totally fine. Like, you can just, like, you know, get good headshots on enemies. Of course, you want to build up Deadhead and stuff. The reload's not too long. Just kind of doing, like, good arm cannon things, really. Like, not too bad. Just solid gun. You shoot an enemy in the head, do solid damage, like, eliminates enemies pretty effectively. And then the Incarnon form is very weird. Now, this Incarnon form is a giant charged laser that, while charging, has a big AoE on it. So what that means is you're going to do a bunch of, like, heat and viral procs and everything and prime enemies. And then it's going to fire this big piercing beam that's going to kill basically anything you're pointing it at very considerable range. So it's a weird one to use because you kind of want to sweep it through a crowd and get them all primed up and stuff. And even on, like, regular enemies, especially like butchers and stuff, like, you don't have to charge this up all the way. You'll get, like, a couple heat procs on them, a couple viral procs, and they'll simply just die. Only really on the heavies should you even, like, be going to full charge. And honestly, a lot of levels, even for them, charging up is kind of, like, not necessary. This weapon, when used properly, will just, like, one-shot acolytes and stuff. But I, of course, have to admit that it is a weird gun that is kind of awkward to use in a number of situations. Honestly, for me, it might be that I'm actually docking this weapon too much because I like it personally, so I put it at B+. I would see a very reasonable argument for putting this weapon in, like, an A- type category. But I wanted to keep it safe with people's expectations because I know I personally love this thing. That this is probably about a B rank weapon, and hey, if you have a better time with it than that or have a higher evaluation of it than that, then hey, that makes me happy, I guess, right? With that, let's talk about the Ruvox. This is the worst of the bunch, and it's also the weirdest. Most of its evolutions kind of hardly matter, and it's got some strange things going on with its evolutions. The specific one that I do want to talk about is its Evolution 5 of Vulnerability Serum. This is impaled enemies are 35% more vulnerable to status chance. So impaled enemies refers to whenever this is in Incarnon form, if you do heavy slams, you can put enemies up on spikes, and they're 35% more vulnerable to status chance. Really, really weird thing about how this works is it actually causes some statuses to loop themselves and re-proc. So if you have, like, a gas proc on an enemy, if they're up on the spike, the gas proc will proc gas, like, just re-upping itself and just kind of going infinite with it. That is, like, cute, but, like, not actually good from my testing. So I do know that build exists for anyone who's going to, well, actually me. But this build is actually performing way better in actual practice for me. This is kind of usual influence stuff, but there's actually a kind of synergy here where you get to do better things than normal in some cases, and that is because of Evolution 3, which is for each enemy hit by slam radius, gain 4 combo count. Now, it's very sad that we don't get to run this plus 60% slam radius. God, do I wish that was the Evolution 2 instead, so we could get 60% slam radius plus this effect. But with Shockwave synergy, we can actually build combo very, very quickly, meaning we don't really need to rely on the Galvanized Reflex to give us our combo, and we can actually sit at 12x combo most of the time, making our use of Blood Rush and Weeping Wounds much, much more potent and allowing us to proc electricity way more often. With that, we're running Focus Energy plus Galvanized Reflex so we can stay at those higher combos for longer, and of course the electricity certainly doesn't hurt our influence build. So this is kind of a weird one, but you actually want to do regular slams and then heavy slams, and it also allows you to evolve this weapon very, very quickly. So you do need groups, of course, to charge it up, but if you have any kind of, like, a reasonable... Please. If you have any kind of, like, a reasonable group, you can get that charged up very quickly. Then you can just do heavy slams, which do pretty well whenever you're at higher combos, as you can see. Of course, it is a weird one, and of course, there's better things for you to be doing influence slams with. Of course, I don't have the melee combo here, but you can see that, like, it's pretty effective. The blast that's inherent to this, plus the influence electricity, is pretty nice, and the kind of extra area outside of this that you're going to get from influence will actually kill a lot of enemies through a lot of walls. And because we keep that, like, base 5x, you don't actually need to extend the combo, but of course that would be good if you had a little bit of extra combo duration from, like, a Dexterity Arcane somewhere. So it is good, but it's just kind of, it's a weird one. It's, like, just less, it's a less convenient just weirder slam influence build. Like things like of course, the Titron are going to be much better at doing this than this is. Things like the Vertilac I find to also be much more convenient, but it can do it. It's a weird one, but it can do the things. So yeah, that is the Ruvox and all the other Incarnons for the different locations, whether that's from the Zariman or the labs and whatever you're getting. They're all good weapons, just to varying degrees, with the Onos and Ruvox mostly getting docked for being kind of weirdos that kind of want more weird things from you, rather than actually being like bad weapons, of course. Anyway, that's going to do it for this video. Hopefully this has been helpful to you. Of course, you can find all of those on the site. Those have been moved, notably, to just the Incarnon section. They're no longer their own separate page. All of the Incarnons are in one spot now over on the site on Brozime.com, so you can check all those out really easily. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you tomorrow. Hey everybody, it's time to thank the patrons that are hanging around and supporting the channel. So, start with that. The $10 patrons are Atheon, Alex Farnham, Arbiter Daydream, Barkus, Benuven, Plotomatic, Brutus Salazar, Candelathra, Blob World, Dylan Dworsky, Athrain, James Harthorn, JC4 Science, Josh, Luzanth, Vicotil, Michta, Nerve, Ruby, Sanyu, Sharp247, The Coupon of Death, Waifu Wars, Wodad01, and Zeraphir. Also, thanks, of course, to all of the other patrons for supporting the channel. It is much appreciated. It's a little sneak peek on what we're getting into. There's going to be a lot more of these kind of big re-reviews of weapon types and their new builds and stuff, as things changed a lot at the end of last year. And of course, there's also planned new free-to-play before we get into any more big updates. So look forward to that.